go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the COSA Shop Talk with APPX this year. And today's topic is the consideration for an online system for maintaining and managing record schedules. And today, our presenter is Steve Frizzell, who's the CEO for APPX Software. And let me tell you just a little bit about Steve. As I said, Steve is the CEO of APPX Software. He has over 40 years of experience developing and supporting software solutions for many types of organizations. He and his staff have been developing a support software solutions for state archives for over 10 years. So I'd like to welcome Steve, and we will go ahead and turn the presentation over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So today we're going to review the various requirements for maintaining and managing schedules with an online system. Over the last several years, we have implemented scheduling for 4 different state archives, and we've figured out that they all do it a little bit differently, but they have a lot of common requirements as well. So managing schedules with a software system can be very challenging because of the many different situations that must be handled and accounted for. But on the other hand, there's a lot of substantial benefits that you can also receive. I'm lucky I'll keep my presentation in sync here. I tend to get a little bit off track sometimes. So if you're looking at the benefits of maintaining your schedules and items online compared to the traditional tools that a lot of people have used, such as Word or Excel, there can be quite a few. Word and Excel offer flexibility that you may not have sometimes with a software system, because you can pretty much type whatever you want into Word or Excel. You can make it look just about any way you want as well. Computer systems, on the other hand, tend to be more restrictive with regard to formatting and the data that you can capture. But the bright side of that is that they enforce consistency in your data, so that they require that you enter very structured data into fields. You can also enforce rules for entering and validating the data relating to your schedules. It's much harder to enforce edit checks and rules in Word or Excel. And you also get more control over changes that you might make to schedules, whether it's edit changes or amendments. So one of the things we have to do is we have to maintain change control to be able to manage your schedules online. You need to be able to track amendments. You need to be able to track the approval process for those amendments. And you need to be able to control editing data as well. And if you're going to allow the amending of the schedules, you need to also maintain a history of those amendments so that you can see not just the current revision of the schedule, but also the previous revisions of them going back through time. So a good software system should provide that kind of change history as you edit and amend your schedules. Another one of the important things is the workflow for approval of amendments. Sometimes the amendment can be approved simply by the director of the archives. Other times it might require a much more sophisticated series of approval steps, maybe starting with the review committee and then the archive director, maybe then the agency director, maybe a record committee. So there can be a very complex workflow associated with approving an amendment as well. The system should be able to provide that kind of control over the approval process. The system has to also be able to create your schedule documents. And there's two variations that you should be able to create. One should be a draft document. It's going to be reviewed, and that document should be able to show you the previous revision as well as the changes that have been made to the new revision. That way the person who's reviewing it can see on the same page, can see the current schedule and the proposed schedule. and review it effectively. And then you need to be able to also create the final published version of the schedule or an item or a schedule. And once you have all of that data in the system, then you want to make sure that it's searchable by the agencies and by the other people that need access to that schedule information. So you'd like to be able to have a web interface that allows schedules to be searched for so that you can find the appropriate schedule for different types of records, and an agency can then manage the records accordingly. Of course, there's two types of schedules. There's the general schedules that are published by just about every state archive. And then there are the agency-specific schedules, which are specific to a certain record that a certain agency may create. So you need to be able to manage both types of those records. Now, once you have all of your information online, then there are other benefits that you can receive from an online system as well. You have the potential then to integrate those schedules with record center transfers from the agencies, so that when a transfer is received in the record center, you can identify the appropriate series, and the system will automatically determine the appropriate retention and disposition for those boxes that have just been received. Then when the container records are created in the inventory, appropriate schedule can be linked to that inventory record, and the retention disposition can be stored in the record as well. So once you've got inventory that is aware of the retention and disposition, then you can also perform disposition processing very effectively. You can have the system select all of the containers or boxes that are due for processing because the retention has expired. You can create workflows to approve the destruction or the transfer to the archives depending on the disposition. Then when the disposition is finally completed, then you can update the container records with the final disposition for those boxes. One of the other things that you can do also is you can have the system keep track of an annual review of the agency-specific schedules by the various agencies. So that each agency can be provided with a list of their schedules and can be asked to approve them again for the coming year. There's four basic types of schedules that we encounter. One of them is just a typical general schedule, where you have a schedule with a list of items that are related, usually by function. And then we also have agency-specific schedules. Again, this would be a schedule that's applicable to a single agency or an agency and the divisions within. And it would have a list of schedule items that are associated one-to-one with series records. Have schedules for that particular agency. Then we also have run into now more and more where archives are wanting to abandon the concept of a schedule, just maintain their items as individual standalone items. So we have to be able to support individual standalone general schedule items, and we have to be able to support individual standalone agency-specific items. So why would they want to do standalone items versus a schedule? Well, for one, you have a lot more flexibility when it comes to amending an item. If you're maintaining a schedule, then if you want to amend an item on that schedule, you typically have to do it to amend the entire schedule, even though only one or two items might be changing on it. If you're maintaining individual items, they can be changed and amended individually and submitted for approval on an individual basis, and they don't require that the entire schedule be submitted for approval. When you're submitting the entire schedule for approval, you have to make sure that you differentiate between which items are being amended, which ones are unchanged. Individual items also give you more flexibility when it comes to the grouping of items, because you can associate tags with various items. You can identify items being a budget item, a personnel item, an administrative item. You can define and use whatever tags you want and assign multiple tags to each item. So that lets you then group your items based on tags or other attributes. For example, you could group your items by agency in the case of agency-specific individual items. Then finally, it can avoid, in a few cases, it can avoid duplication of items across multiple general schedules. Once in a great while, you have an item that you want to put on two different general schedules. And if you're maintaining individual items, then you don't have that issue to deal with. So if you're going to put your schedules online, there's some basic infrastructure that you need to support. One of the things you need is an agency master file. So you want to be able to maintain a file of all of the agencies and all the divisions and departments in your state archive. And you want to be able to reference those agencies in the schedule data that you maintain. You also will want to maintain a master file of bibliographic records. Typically, these are series records in the case of the state archive. So you'd like a master file of all the different series that you've created for the different agencies and the records that they create. And you may want to also include a subject master file, because one of the things we can do with schedules is we can potentially add access points to schedule items, and make them searchable then based on the access points. So you may want to include a subject heading master file as well if you're going to implement an online system and want to be able to have as much search flexibility as possible. So just to take a look at an example of an agency master file, this is one of the departments at North Carolina Archives. It's the Department of Administration. You can see here that we've got a multi-level hierarchy of agencies and departments, divisions, and sections within that agency. So we can assign schedules at any level within this hierarchy. So we can assign a schedule at the highest level of the department or lower level within that organization. This screen is an example of a list of bibliographic records. And again, this is a particular record group at the top there. If you look, it's the administration record group. So it's the record group that corresponds to that Department of Administration. And you can see here all the series records that are listed under that record group. So these are the series records that need to have, or potentially need to have, schedules associated with them. If they're records that are already in the archive, in the custody of the archive, then you probably don't need schedules on them. But if they're records that are still being created and maintained by agencies and stored in the record center, then you probably do want schedules for them. And so you need to have these series defined in a master file so that your schedules can be associated with the various series that apply to schedule. So this is a sample screen listing some of the terms of subject master file, subject heading file. These happen to be topical terms. Again, you would use these terms to create access points on subject items if you wanted them to be searchable based on various subject headings. So if you're going to store your schedules and your items in a computer system, there's certain information that you really need to make sure you include. When you're maintaining that information. So there's some supporting files that are needed to go along with that. So one of the files you would want to have to go along with maintaining your schedules would be a tag file. You'd like to be able to define your own tags, whatever they are. You have collections, there could be tags for different types of collections. If you have state records, you can have tags for different types of groupings of state records, like budget records, administration records, and so forth. You also will want to create a reference file for approval entities that will be used in the system, so that you can specify that the archive director, for example, is an approval entity, because certain types of items can be approved directly by the director of the archives. You may also specify that the state record committee is an approval entity, because some records have to be approved by the record committee. So again, you should be able to define as many of these approval entities as are applicable for your particular situation. We also, because there can be a lot of different workflows that come into play depending on the type of item, it'd be nice to be able to define templates for workflows so that you could have a workflow that corresponded to the state record committee, the steps that you have to go through to end up with the state record committee approving it, or you might have another workflow where it's reviewed by a committee and then goes to the director of the archives to be approved, and so forth. So you want to have some supporting files that let you define templates for workflows and for steps on those workflows. Also, each of the steps typically has a reviewer associated with it. So the reviewer might be the archive director, might be the agency director, could be a chief administrative officer at the agency. So there could be a number of different reviewers that we want to associate with the different steps of the workflow as well. So what you need to have here is a whole little bit of infrastructure that can be used to support the approval workflow concept within the system. This is a sample screen listing some of the record tags. These happen to come from North Carolina. They correspond to the various types of non-state records in this case that they have in their collections. These are all user definable, so you can have hundreds of tags if you have that many different ways that you want to associate with your schedules. This is an example of a couple of approval entities. Again, these two are the archive director and the record committee. So you'd want to identify who are the entities that ultimately approve amendments to the schedule, have some way to identify them. Then these are the various reviewers that might be called into play at different steps during the approval process. So a reviewer could be the archive director, could be an agency director, anybody, could be a records officer, anybody that might be called upon to review a schedule during the approval process. This is an example of a workflow template. In this case, it's a state record committee standard template. It has 4 steps. The steps, if you can read it, are appraisal committee review, submit to state archives director, submit to agency CAO, submit to the state record committee. So the system would be able to track that amended item through all 4 of those steps and make sure that they were signed off at each level and ultimately approved by the record committee. And this screen is a little out of order, but it's basically the master file of the steps that you might use on a workflow template. Then you need to be able to also manage that whole process. So if you have a number of items, you might have 25 or 50 items that are in various stages of being amended. You need a screen like this that can list all of the items and show you the status of them, let you drill down to see the detail of them and where they are in the approval process, and what each one is waiting on at the moment. So if you have a bottleneck with a certain person that's holding things up, you can find that out here. So this screen allows you to manage that whole workflow process to keep items moving through the workflow. And it ends up with, once the approval has come through from the final step, the workflow, then you can finalize the item, which makes it eligible for being used as the active retention and disposition for records. So just as an example, if you're going to maintain your schedules, there are certain basic information that you really need to maintain for every schedule. So I've listed here on the screens the most common ones. You need some kind of a disposition authority or a unique identifier for each schedule. You're also typically going to need an amendment number, so you can see that your schedule has been amended one time or two times or three times. Schedule also, each amendment would typically have an effective date range, date that went into effect and the date that it went out of effect, it's no longer being used. The schedule needs to have a title, and that's used when you're printing your schedule document. You're going to have a title that you print on the top of the pages. So you get a description for the schedule. That also would be printed on the schedule document. Then you're going to need some change control fields, ability to track the status of it. If it's being revised, why is it being revised? What's the status of the revision? And what are the different dates that it went through the various status steps? And then there's a variety of notes that you might want to attach to a schedule. So you can attach general schedule notes. You might want to attach notes that are specific to the why it's being revised, revision notes. You can also attach documents. So if you have a Word document or a spreadsheet or any type of document, PDF document, they can be uploaded and attached to the schedule, and then they become part of that schedule in the system. And this allows you to have those documents that are related to the schedule readily available. They can be retrieved and viewed anytime you want. Then you're going to associate tags with the schedule, research capabilities. Schedule can also be restricted to the various agencies. The agency-specific schedule is always restricted to one specific agency. General schedules can optionally be restricted or not. So you could restrict a general schedule to one specific agency. For example, at Utah, I think the Highway Department actually has a general schedule that can be only used by the Highway Department. So that's sometimes capability that you might want to be able to. And then, of course, the schedule is going to have scheduled items associated with it. And those items can be three basic types. You can have a group, which is a way of grouping related items on that schedule. Then you can have individual items within a group. Then within an item, you can have sub-items. And in this case, we usually allow for 3 levels of sub-items within an item. And we'll see some examples of that in just a minute. So this is an example of a list of the general schedules for, in this case, it's North Carolina. And what you can see here, if you look at the amendment column, you can see that GRS 001 has been amended once. Then 0 is the initial revision. Then Amendment 1 is an amendment to that. So over here under revision type, you can see that it's the initial revision or amendment. You see the title of the schedule here and the amendments. So this is a good way to see each of the schedules and how many revisions or amendments they've gone through. Then from this screen, you can drill down and see the detail of the schedules, individual schedules that are listed. So if you were to drill down, this one happens to be GRS 005. I'm going to back up here. So right here you see GRS 005 has been amended once. Financial management. So this is the detail of that particular schedule record. This is amendment number 1. If you look up in the right-hand corner here, you can see it was effective on July 1st of 2019. It's been finalized, which Means that it's currently in effect. You can see the revision is active. That little checkbox tells you that this revision is the active revision for the schedule. You can see the different status dates that it went through here, when the draft was begun, when it was finished being revised, when it was submitted, who submitted it. It was submitted to read that myself, but it's one of the approval entities. Then here you see the description, and over here you see a place for the tags. You can maintain the tags. You also see on the bottom you can have access to scheduled notes, revision notes, you can add attachments, and you can also restrict the schedule to specific agencies. But again, there's typically not agencies that are assigned to general schedules. So this would be an example of how those schedule fields or attributes might be presented on a screen to allow you to maintain the schedule information, not the items on the schedule, but the schedule itself. This is another example. In this case, this is a list of general schedules for the District of Columbia. So you see their schedules, again, they're all at 0 in this case. And so they have about 24, actually 23, there's a missing one. So they have 23 general schedules listed here. And if you drill down to the first one, personnel records, then you see a similar screen that we saw showing all the detail for that particular general schedule. So every schedule, of course, has to have items associated with it, or it wouldn't be a schedule. So when you're creating the items that you want to schedule, there's a set of basic information that you'd want to include there as well. And so you're going to have an item disposition authority. Again, that's going to be a unique identifier for each item on the schedule. Then you're going to have an amendment number as well. And so you have items on a schedule that may or may not be amended every time the schedule is amended. So it is possible that the amendment number for the schedule may be greater than the amendment number for an item on the schedule. Each item also has an effective date range. In the case of an item on a schedule, it's the same as the schedule. In the case of a standalone item, it can have its own effective date range. And there's a status. Each item has its own status with its own change control information. Each item has to be one of the three types, either a group, an item, or a sub-item. Again, groups only apply to schedules. Individual standalone items they're not grouped by a group, but they can be grouped by other mechanisms such as the tags. Then you're going to have a heading, and you're going to have a description for each item. As far as the description, you could have a full description along with a shorter abstract for the item. And that's the list of, you see it's one of three, so there's more items that we're going to talk about. But, just to illustrate these initial items, this is a sample list of items that appear on general schedule, the financial management general schedule, looked at a minute ago. And you see here on the left-hand side that we have a group, which is group 1, and then we have item 1 in group 1. We have sub-item 1, item 1, sub-item number 3. In this case, there's only one sub-item. Down here, here's one that has 3 sub-items for an item. On the bottom, you see an example where we have 2 levels of sub-items. So we have sub-item number 1 and sub-item 1-1 and 1-2 listed here. You see the disposition authority that identifies the items and the title. You don't see the description on this particular field, but we'll see it in a minute. So this screen is the screen that shows you all of the information for a particular schedule item. So if you drill down from the list of items to a specific item, you would see the full detail screen like this one. So you see again that there's a heading, the description. See the revision type is that this is an unchanged item. That means that even though the schedule is being amended, this particular item was not being amended on this particular revision of the schedule. Here you see schedule information at the top, the effective date from the schedule along with the amendment number of the schedule. And then there's some other attributes here we'll cover in just a minute. I'm not going to go through everything on the screen at this point. This is another list of items that appear on these are actually individual general schedule items. So these are items that aren't grouped by a schedule, they're just standalone individual items. These are items from Utah. And so you see that each item stands by itself. Each item has its own amendment history. This particular one, vehicle maintenance records, is revision 0, revision 1. You can see some items are consolidated, some of them discontinued. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So the only real difference here is that there's no schedule record grouping these individual items. They're standalone. They don't need a schedule to be grouped. When you drill down, you would see the same screen, or a very similar screen that you saw when you drill down from a schedule line. The only difference you notice at the top, there's no schedule information because this item isn't associated with a schedule. It stands all by itself. This one does have a couple of tags associated with it. And talk about the scheduled records in a moment. Right, so some of the additional attributes for items would include the retention and disposition information, retention notes, including justification notes for why you assigned a particular retention and disposition. Citations can be added. So if you have certain statutes that are used to justify retention and disposition, those statutes can be quoted and included as part of the information for a schedule item. Then you can also have appraisal information stored with the schedule item as well, so that can indicate whether the item has administrative value, fiscal value, historical value, and so forth. You can add appraisal notes as well. So you can not only describe the item, but you can include related information as well. It's all together in one place where it's easily accessible to somebody who needs to see the information for that item. So this is the same item we looked at a minute ago, I believe. And you can see that this item has retention and disposition. It says retained for 3 years after disposition of asset, and then destroy the records. So that disposition actually has both an event and a time period associated with it. It has to be kept for 3 years after an event takes place. The appraisal information, there's a button here that's highlighted that tells you that there is appraisal information that's entered. You can't see it on this screen, but if you click on that button, you would see appropriate appraisal information. There's also a retention justification note. If you click on that button, you would see it. In fact, this is a retention justification note here. What they actually did here was they included the citation information as a retention justification note. You can put whatever you want in a note. We actually have a particular field that you can use just for citations, but the note works just as well. Again, the important thing, and this is the appraisal screen, where you can indicate appraisal value of the item. The important thing to realize is that you need places to associate all of this information. You need to be able to enter notes. You need to be able to associate related documents. You need to be able to quantify or identify the citations that apply. If the system doesn't let you do that, then it's not providing you with all of the capabilities that you really need to manage those schedule items. So there's a few more note types that you might want to add to an item. So you might have arrangement notes, you might have use restrictions, revision notes at the item level. I mentioned you can have revision notes at the schedule level, where every item can also have revision notes associated with it. And you can have notes regarding the status of the item. I mentioned you can attach documents. Then you can also have consolidation crosswalks for an item. So sometimes, when an item is being discontinued, it gets replaced by another item, and you'd like to be able to have a crosswalk that says this item has been replaced by this other item. So that's what our consolidation will let you do. It lets you consolidate an item into one or more other items. The system provides you visibility of those consolidations. You also would like to be able to see the containers that a particular schedule item might be associated with. So if you have a schedule item and there's no containers in the record center, then maybe you don't need that item anymore. So that might be important to see that you still have items in the inventory and what they are and how long they've been there and so forth. And probably more important is you need to be able to see which record series are associated with an item. In the case of an agency-specific item, it's a one-to-one relationship with a series record. In the case of a general schedule item, there could potentially be hundreds of series that are controlled by that one retention schedule item. So you need to be able to maintain those related series records as part of that schedule item. Then finally, you want to be able to search and group using tags or access points. And also, it's nice to have the ability to add your own index terms. In our particular system, we index all the words in every note, so everything's searchable. But if you have additional index terms that you want to add, they can be thrown into the mix as well. You can add whatever index terms are applicable, even though they may not be part of a description. So this screen shows you the consolidation, the items that have been consolidated into an item. We go back here. If you look at the bottom, you can see this item has 7 items that have been consolidated into it. So if you were to click on this View Consolidations button, you would see this list of these 7 items that have been discontinued and replaced by this one item. So that's what we mean by consolidation. This is an important capability that you really need to have. Otherwise, you lose track of what happened to an item. A lot of items are discontinued because the records are no longer being created and no longer in the record center. Sometimes when you rework your schedules, you streamline things, and you maybe, in this case, eliminate 7 items and replace it with one individual item. This is an individual schedule item. Oh, if you look up here, you see the first item listed as GRS 117. So from this list, you can also drill down and see the detail of any one of these 7 items. So if we were to drill down, we would see that this is item number 117 here, and it's been consolidated into one item, which happens to be the one we were just looking at. It was consolidated, and it was active through the end of August of 2016. So at that point in time, it got consolidated into that other item. We also have the amendment history we could see for this item as well. So again, the important thing here is that there's this link that's maintained between the discontinued item and the items that may have replaced it. And then I also mentioned that this record had, going back a little farther, this particular schedule item had 32 scheduled records, meaning series that are controlled by this schedule item. So we have one schedule item, it's a general schedule item, and there are 32 individual series, record series, that have this same retention. And so if we move back forward again, this is a list of the 32 series records that are controlled by that one general schedule item. So you can easily assign additional records. You can remove records that no longer are controlled. So if you decide that a series should be controlled by a different schedule item, you can remove the series from one item and add it to another item. So the system allows you the ability to manage that whole process of which schedule items are associated with general schedule items. All right, so with regard to change control, when you amend an item, you need to be able to see the amendment history of that item. You need to see the list of every amendment that it's had. You need to be able to drill down to actually see that exact item as it existed at the point in time that it was an active item before it was replaced by an amendment. So that gives you the ability then to easily compare the current version with the previous revision and see what changed. It gives you a clear history of what it used to be versus what it is now. Sometimes that's lost when you start directly editing your schedule information. So if you go in and start changing it, it changes right then, and you've lost the history of what it used to be. So it's important that the system be able to accommodate change without losing visibility of the values that used to be in play. Also, sometimes you change, you don't have to just edit an item. You're not really amending it. Maybe there's a typographical error in the schedule description. Maybe you want to go and correct a misspelling. So the system does allow you to do that, but it keeps a change history of what was changed and who did it and when. So even though the change occurred without going through a formal amendment process, the change is still tracked. In the case of an amendment, then you can have a streamlined approach where you simply identify who's the approval entity and when they approved it, or you can have a detailed workflow that multiple review steps that have to be accomplished before the approval takes place. So the system accommodates that. The individual item can go through 5 different statuses. It starts out in draft status, and during in draft status, you can change it any way you want until the person who's editing it decides it's ready to be submitted for approval. Maybe it's going to be submitted to be reviewed. And so once it reaches the ready to submit status, then it gets reviewed, and when it's acceptable, then it gets submitted. Once it's submitted for approval, then it's either going to be approved or not approved. If it's not approved, it's going to cycle back into the draft status, be revised and resubmitted. And eventually, it'll be approved and then finalized. So every item goes through this cycle of statuses, culminating in a finalized item. This is an example of amendment history. It's unfortunately not a real good one because it shows 3 amendments and it was unchanged basically. It was this is an item on a schedule. The schedule got revised, but this particular item didn't get changed either time. But it still shows up as having been amended 3 times, but the amendment number did not change. So you know that, and it says unchanged item. So you know that it, even though the schedule it was on was amended, it wasn't amended at the same time. And again, from this screen, you can drill down to see the actual detail of each revision. In this case, all 3 would be the same. All right, so creation of your schedule documents is also an important capability of any system. Mentioned earlier, you need to be able to create draft documents as well as final documents that are published. The case of a schedule, you want to print the schedule with all the items on it. In the case of individual items, you may still want to print them as groups by grouping them based on different characteristics. And you might want to print a draft version. The draft version, you want to clearly identify which ones are unchanged and which ones are changed. In the case of changed items, you want to be able to show previous revision as well as the new proposed revision. Then you need to be able to create the final documents that are going to be published. This is an example of first page of a general schedule from the District of Columbia. Of course, the schedule can be formatted in different ways depending on your requirements, but this happens to match the way they're used to do it. So you see here the schedule description, you see the approval date, the disposition authority, heading, personnel records is the schedule title. Then you see the items listed here, items and sub-items as well. And over here, the retention and disposition. Just about any of the information that is maintained for a schedule and for the items on the schedule can be included in the published schedule document, depending on requirements of the archives. Every archive is different in terms of the information that they want on their schedules. Then finally, you want to make sure that the information that you're maintaining is searchable, because agencies need to be able to look up schedules. They need to be able to find the appropriate schedules for different records that they create. They need to be able to see a general schedule and all the items on it. Be able to see their agency-specific items. So if they have 20 or 30 items that are specific to them, they need to be able to access those and see them. They need to see the amendments, and they quite often need to see the previous revisions of them, so they have visibility of what changed. So you really need a good web search capability to go with all of this, so that users of this information have access to it. The search ideally would incorporate searching on tags, searching by agencies, by access points, and the index terms that I mentioned. So this is an example of a schedule search where you're searching for schedules. And you can see here keyword search capability. You can also see the ability to search on specific fields of information as well. And then listed here, there's only two in our test data. There's only 2 results. But you can also drill down to print the actual schedule itself, which in this case is GRS 001. Or you can view the items in your web browser by clicking View Items. Now, typically, this search would be embedded in one of your pages with your archive heading, and your sidebars, and whatever decorations are on your web pages. So this is just the content that would be in the middle of one of your pages, typically. But it's kind of generic here, so to illustrate that it can be inserted in any web page. This is a screenshot of one of Utah's, actually the landing page for the Utah Retention Schedule search. They can search general schedules by keyword by typing in a value here, and they can also search by series and by agency. I got clipped off on the bottom here. But in this case, if you look, we typed in the keyword of child and searched, and then that brought up a list of items that it found. Again, Utah, for general schedules, doesn't use schedules anymore. They're all standalone items. So it brought up a list of all the standalone items that the word child was associated with. There were 28 of them. Then you notice over here, too, that you have facets that can be used to narrow down the result list even more. So out of those 28, 18 are current and 10 are discontinued. And then over here you see categories with tags that can break the list down as well. And on each of these items, you can click to view the full detail of the item, or you can create a PDF report showing the full detail of that particular item. So this is what the detail of the item looks like. If you drill down on the item, you see the description, the retention and disposition information, appraisal value, appraisal note, different tags that are associated with it, effective date. I got clipped off at the bottom there, but there's additional information that can be included as well on this web search. So someone who's searching for an individual item can see all the details for that item. If they had searched by agency back on that original page, then they have the ability to select from a list of agencies or click on a letter to redisplay the list based on the agency starting with that letter. Or they can actually just type in a series number directly if they know a series number. The whole idea is they're trying to get to the retention and disposition for an agency-specific series. So they can either do it by series or by going through the agency and selecting from a list of records associated with that agency. In this case, we went straight to the series record. So this is the retention for that series. So it shows you the series number, the title, description. Then it shows the retention information that's linked to that series record as well. So this is a good example of an agency-specific series retention schedule. This screen shows that if you search by agency, you'd see that in this case that there was not just one series, but there were actually 6 series that have agency-specific schedules associated with them. If you were to select the PDF option, this is what the PDF report Utah looks like for that particular item, that 27801 item. So again, it includes all the relevant information about that particular item. And as a PDF, it can be saved or printed. So that's a quick, well, maybe not as quick as it could have been, but that's a quick overview of the requirements and the capabilities that you might look for in a scheduling system if you're going to maintain your schedules online. So at this point, I guess we'll turn it back over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Steve. We appreciate this presentation. You know, who knew that records retention schedules had so much in them? We think about them as, oh, well, there's the item, and we need to figure out how long we're going to keep them. But when you start really thinking about it, there's a lot involved in making sure that you can identify the item, track it, and, you know, follow what happens to the item if it changes or over time. So, wow, that's a lot of information. So now we have a chance for questions and comments. So if you guys have anything you'd like to ask Steve about the process or things you should be looking for, you know, please type them into chat. If you happen to be on and you have used the system and you want to share a comment, you know, please feel free to do that as well. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to type some stuff in, but while we're waiting, you know, Steve, if I wanted more information from you guys on what your system offered here, I mean, you did a really great job here of just talking in general terms about what we should be looking for. But if I really wanted to find out about your system, what would I do, or how would I go about doing that?
Well, I think the easiest way would be to simply send us an email. And you could send that to info at axiom.com, AXAEM.com, or info at APPX.com, APPX.com. I'll type that in as a chat message.
I think I got it for you.
You got it for me? Okay.
I think so. So, yeah, great. Well, that's a great way to get more specific information about this. One of the things that intrigued me about what you showed in the system you showed was the ability to assign the appraisal values. I would think that being able to put together the list of your historical record series, or emergency preparedness, if you could identify what items were, which record series were vital, that might make working with different agencies so much easier when you say, hey, look, these are your vital records, or these are your historical records. So I thought that was a really great use of some additional information that we don't think about all the time when we're putting together record series.
Yeah, the appraisal information can be used for a number of purposes. There's also a much more sophisticated scoring capability for appraisal to evaluate your records. I didn't really go into that.
So you've got the whole range there. You can go as simple as you need, or you can also go in greater depth and detail.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions or comments here. So you must have blown them away with this information. You just gave them so much good stuff that they're going to have to go home and evaluate it. But they do know how we can get in touch with you again if someone wants more information or wants to ask specifically. And now you mentioned Utah and District of Columbia and North Carolina as states that are using this particular system, correct?
Yes, and Indiana also is using it.
And Indiana. Okay, so that's another source people could go to, is they could talk to those archives as well to, get a perspective on how this is working for them and what they like about a system like this. So, well, if I don't see any more questions, like I said, I know that was a lot of information, and we appreciate all of your time, Steve, and stuff, and the information you shared with us. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to remind you guys we have some other great webinars still this month. Next week, next Thursday, we have our NARA webinar, and it's on open records FOIA and government transparency, and it's going to be with NARA and with a representative from the Utah State Archives, actually. So that's a great one. If you haven't signed up for that, we hope you will. And then December 17th will be the Ferry webinar on fundamentals of digital processing workflows. So again, two great webinars. And I know December is a really busy month, but I do hope you'll take advantage of these webinars that are available. And of course, all our webinars are recorded. So if for some chance you didn't get to stay for the whole thing, or you want to listen to it again, or you know someone who might be interested in this topic, you'll be able to send them the link. They're recorded and available as a link on our website under videos and recordings. Now, we have other Shop Talks scheduled coming up. Family Search is going to do one in early 2020, and Ancestry is going to do one in March or April of 2020. So just watch for the website. We'll have registration and details on that. So I'd like to take a moment to just thank Steve for being our presenter today. There's always ways to stay connected to people on COSA. We, of course, have our website, our resource center. We have Twitter, of course, Facebook, and our YouTube channel. So these are all great ways to stay connected and to get more information about any of these topics. As always, we appreciate your feedback on these webinars. It helps us plan and schedule new ones, and it helps our presenters to know what you liked and what you found useful and helpful in them. So, Steve, I'd like to thank you so much again for being our presenter today and sharing us these tips about what you should be looking for as you develop a record retention schedule software. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have a great holiday. Hopefully we'll see you next week at the NARA webinar, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, and everyone have a great afternoon.
All right.